welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. RBI Deputy Governor Viral Acharya's resignation was more a matter of when rather than if, after a hard-hitting speech he gave last October, where he cautioned against governments that meddle with central bankers. That the economist and central banker has chosen to give up his position 6 months before he retires is telling. Viral Acharya says the reasons are personal. Let's begin by giving you more details.
Yet another high-profile resignation at the Reserve Bank of India after Urjit Patel, and this time it's the Deputy Governor, Viral Acharya. Though the official communication from the central bank states that Viral Acharya resigned from the Reserve Bank of India due to unavoidable personal circumstances. But is it the only reason? Are the questions we asked. But first, let us look at the role and contribution of Viral Acharya to the Reserve Bank of India and its functioning in the past 2.5 years. From heading the Financial Stability Unit to leading the Monetary Policy Department and Department of Statistics Information at the Central Bank, Acharya has made significant contribution. He has also been known for his hawkish stance on monetary policy, agreeing to only 2 repo rate cuts in the last 15 monetary policy reviews. In fact, he was not in favor of a rate cut even in the February and April credit policies, but was outvoted by other MPC members. A traditional economist, Acharya's differing opinions did not end just with credit policy decisions. He delivered a strongly worded, hard-hitting speech last October that criticized the centre's interference in RBI's functioning. His speech also indicated that RBI's regulatory independence and autonomy were being compromised. Acharya has strongly opposed the transfer of surplus RBI reserves to government coffers, something that the government has been pushing for. His controversial speech led to speculation that he would resign soon after. Viral Acharya's resignation may have been widely expected, but the fact that he chose to call it quits just 6 months before his term was up has raised the question of the central bank's autonomy once again.
So central bankers are very rarely in the public eye, but a spate of resignations and early departures in the central bank in the last few years has put the focus sharply on the relationship between the government and economic advisors who have called it quits. It started, of course, with Raghuram Rajan, who wasn't offered a second term, Urjit Patel, who left 9 months before his term ended, Arvind Subramanian, who quit citing personal reasons, and now, of course, Viral Acharya. So is there a pattern? To speak more on this, I'm joined today by Hemendra Hazare, banking expert, M.K. Venu, founding editor of TheWire.in, Anant Narayan, professor at SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, and our very own Maithili Bhusnarmuth, consulting editor at ET Now. Welcome to all of you. Hemendra, let me come to you with the question. Is there a pattern or is everyone reading too much into it?
No, very clearly there is a pattern in the sense that I think outside intellectuals find it difficult to work with this government. But in the case of Dr. Viral Acharya, frankly, I have no sympathy for the man, because after he gave that speech that he did in October, in my opinion, the government should have immediately removed him, because very clearly the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India had stepped out of line. And it's very clear by law that the Reserve Bank of India is subservient to the government. And this is not the way you expect a Deputy Governor to go on public record, to give out his disagreement with the government. If he had such strong views then, the correct option would have been for him to have resigned, like the governor did, a couple of months back. That is the way you show dissent, because very clearly the Reserve Bank of India by law, if you look at section 30 of the Reserve Bank of India Act, is subservient to the government and has to therefore toe the line. So in this particular case, his days were very clearly numbered. I think this should be made very clear to the public that senior officials of the Reserve Bank of India, may it be the Deputy Governor or even the Governor, finally they have to toe the line, or they should resign. But they cannot go on record and make such speeches which are extremely destabilizing.
Equalizing effect. Let me get Maithili in here. How do you look at this, looking back at Viral Acharya's tenure, and of course that infamous speech last October? You cover the sector so closely and for so long in such detail, Maithili. Most knew it was coming. Why the choice of timing?
Well, I think the one is important to remember that friction between the central bank and the government of the day is not new, nor is it unique to India, as we are seeing with the ongoing fracas between Donald Trump and the US Fed chair. So I think it's inevitable that there should be friction because their time dimension is very different. The elected government is only looking at a short-term view till the next elections, whereas the central bank governor and the top officials, they are not elected officials. So they have the liberty and the luxury of taking a longer term view. So frictions are inevitable, but as Hemendra mentioned, once Viral Acharya had kind of really gone public with his dissent and so strongly, it was only a matter of time before he would either have to put in his papers or be asked to go. So it's not a question of where, if, it was only a question of when. The timing, I think, was perhaps inevitable because he's only got 6 months more of his tenure, and he must have been reasonably sure that he would not be offered an extension. Given the fact that he would not get an extension and the fact that the new academic term in the US is starting now, I think the timing is not so puzzling. Perhaps he was persuaded to wait until the elections were over, which is why it is good, because we don't want to rock the boat until the time the elections were over. But I am not very surprised by the act of his resignation, not really, or about the timing. And as far as the Indian economy is concerned, I think our institutions and our economy are strong enough. The presence or absence of one man does not make a difference.
No, absolutely. The presence and absence of one man will not make a difference. And, many of our viewers are wondering why we're talking about Viral Acharya quitting 6 months before, because this has happened in the past with his boss, Urjit Patel. Raghuram Rajan, of course, did not quit earlier, but did not get an extension and revealed later that he wasn't asked to. If he would have, well, he would want to stay back. M.K. Venu, the other side of this is that perhaps these were economists or academicians from abroad who weren't in line with what this government wants or with what India needs right now. And every government is in its right to, not take on board the kind of advice it doesn't need.
Tamanna, it's not necessary that that economists from abroad who become governor Reserve Bank only they disagree with the finance ministry. I can assure you that we've had very good governors, very strong governors like Dr. Venugopal Reddy. He disagreed quite frequently with the finance ministers with whom he worked during UPA, P. Chidambaram, and even later. So my point is, Tamanna, the issue here really is, and I agree with Hemendra Hazari that under the RBI Act, the center has to prevail. The RBI eventually will have to agree to toe the broader line of the center, as it were. But over the years, Tamanna, it is equally true that we have developed a healthy institutional independence in regard to RBI, and which was a contribution of people like Dr. Rangarajan, Venkat Ramanan, and subsequently Dr. Reddy, etc. So my point really is we should go to the origin of this problem. Origin of this problem was when that extraordinary Section 7 was invoked by this government, which was never invoked since independence, not even during the 1991 crisis. Because the reason was very clear. The key point of disagreement was that the BJP government then wanted to dip into some massive reserves of the RBI to meet its other fiscal needs. Now, the point is, my contention is what they have done now, as in Jalan, they appointed Jalan committee to look at it. They could have done it then, if they had done that, then this whole controversy would have been avoided. So even if one assumes that Viral Acharya was out of line in the way he publicly aired his grievances, my sense is that Viral Acharya did it with the governor's, then Urjit Patel's consent. In fact, his speech was cleared by Urjit Patel, and my information is that Viral Acharya wanted to resign along with Urjit Patel, but he was, as Maithili said, he was persuaded to stay back because At that time, government didn't want an exodus at the top of the institution. Probably they wanted to just sort of soft land it. So he's gone. So, but then even the center has to introspect whether on the way it was dealing with this institution. I think that point is still relevant.
Where you want to come in on that part of the debate, Anant, that the centre also needs to introspect if top talent is making a beeline for the exit, and if you count in Arvind Subramanian, and they all of course cite personal reasons, then it makes it 4.
Well, Tamanna, look, I agree with most of the earlier speakers. Few quick learnings, right? One is the entire episode of the fracas between the central bank and the government, which happened the last year, culminating in Dr. Patel quitting and now Dr. Viral Acharya quitting. Frankly, no side comes out looking good on this, and there is a lot of room for introspection for both parties, government as well as the RBI. Second, for academics like me, the sad reality is this whole question of independence of the central bank is probably overrated in the current context. In the past, we've often said that, listen, if you threaten the independence of the central bank, the wrath of the markets will be upon you and things will happen. Both with Dr. Patel moving and today with Dr. Viral Acharya moving, nothing happened to the markets, not just in India. Trump regularly berates the Federal Reserve, and yet nothing seems to really go wrong in the markets there. EU is going through a bit of a political crisis as well. Turkey is going through one. Nothing really seems to matter at this point in time. Things have changed from what they were 10 years ago. I think one takeaway, if I remove the personalities involved, etc., look, I completely agree with Maithili that this is beyond personalities. India as a country, RBI as an institution is much stronger than personalities. Where I would give credit to Viral Acharya is that he raised some really pertinent issues which are worth debating. One quick issue which he raised in the recent past around the true quality and extent of the fiscal deficit of the government. Now, yes, on the one hand, we clearly have a slowdown. We clearly need to revive animal spirits. We clearly need to revive private investment, and things are conducive. Inflation is low. Currency markets are well behaved. Oil prices are down, and globally, people are talking about rate cuts in central banks. Maybe this is a great time to loosen the purses on the fiscal side as well as on the monetary side. Yet the point he raised is valid, which is every time we've done that in the past, 2009, 2012 being fresh in memory, when we loosen monetary policy and fiscal policy together, we become vulnerable to financial instability. And we saw that very painfully during 2013. So maybe there is a debate to have here as to how we can do this revival of the economy without impinging upon financial stability. My takeaway from this entire episode, I do hope the debate continues. Keep the emotions aside, keep the personalities aside. The issues are real. Let's debate as to how we can revive this country, the country's economy,
you made a very
without
good
jeopardizing
point.
the financial stability.
No, Anant, you made a very crucial point there, and this is an open debate. So if someone wants to come in, please indicate and come in with your point of view in this conversation. Anant, you made a very good point there. The crucial point is that who is going to raise these questions which need to be debated on? Are we going to be left with a situation where everyone is happy to toe the line? Do we really want that? Hemendra, you want to come in on that very key point, and Anand says that for all of Viral's faults, like some of which you mentioned, at least he came out and said the things which needed to be said in connection with the monetary policy and the Reserve Bank.
See, the central issue of this whole debate remains that which entity will stimulate the Indian economy. If you read the monetary policy minutes, you will find that Viral Acharya's earlier statement as well as Michael Patra's, there was always concern that there is going to be inflationary pressures. However, the inflation actually has remained quite benign, and the central problem remains that a benign inflation really tells you that the economy is going nowhere, that it is a slowdown. Now, to come out of the slowdown, you require a fiscal stimulation and a monetary easing. Now, unfortunately, the global capital markets does not permit any government in the world to increase the fiscal deficit, and therefore the entire heavy lifting has to be done through monetary policy. Now, in my opinion, even if you do significant easing of monetary policy, you will just get a liquidity trap. You will have a lot of money sloshing around and lead to asset inflation, but will not result in economic recovery and private sector capex. For that, you require a significant fiscal push. And unfortunately, most commentators with the global capital markets,
Yeah.
they do not like this situation at all. So you're caught really in a catch-22. So what you're going to have is that you're going to have these 25 basis points reduction in interest rates, and it'll have absolutely no impact, because at the same time you're putting pressure on the government not to increase the fiscal deficit. So you're just going to have secular stagflation.
No, Hemendra, we're diverting a little from the point. The point is really what Viral was trying to say and the importance of differing voices within the system. M.K. Venu wanted to come in on that point. Yes, Venu.
Tamanna, yeah. Tamanna, in my view, last year the biggest bone of contention was that the government, which was fiscally constrained, they wanted some 3-4. The first figure that was bandied about was 4 lakh crore out of the RBI reserves. Now there is a gentleman in the RBI board today who's part of the Sangh Parivar, and he in fact made a statement that even the 5.5 lakh crore of revaluation reserves which are with the RBI, which is a notional gain on revaluation of gold and foreign exchange, etc. Even that should be accessed. Now that was a very unorthodox, some would even say a crazy idea, and thankfully Bimal Jalan committee is looking at that, and I'm certain that Bimal Jalan committee will not endorse dipping into revaluation reserves. Of course, there are contingency reserves which are accumulated profits from current operations. That Mr. Raghuram Rajan has been regularly giving the centre almost at the rate of some 50,000 crore a year. They've already given the government some 2.5 lakh crores in the last 4-5 years. So I think the centre was getting too greedy, and it is in some ways linked to what Anant Narayan spoke about, the fiscal problem. This government in the last 4 years has been window dressing the fiscal number in very many complex and deceitful ways, and which is all now coming out. So the centre was actually trying to put the burden on RBI. I can understand on monetary policy putting pressure to reduce.
Okay, Maithili wants to come in. Maithili wants to counter that point. Yes,
depend
Maithili.
on RBI to recover all the reserves.
Yeah, Maithili.
Tamanna, actually I think Venu is slightly mistaken on the point of the RBI's reserves, because the fact is that there are many central banks all over the world where the entire reserves are transferred to the government. In fact, they have very few reserves. It might be news to your viewers, but the US Federal Reserve, then the net worth of the US Federal Reserve is actually negative. And the US Federal Reserve has periodically been transferring humongous amounts to the US Treasury. Also, in terms of unorthodox things that central banks do, nothing could have been more unorthodox than the US Treasury's quantitative easing. So, what is orthodox, what is unorthodox at these times is open to judgment, number one. Number two, it is not for Viral Acharya or Raghuram Rajan to act like knights in shining armor to rush to the defense of the central bank's reserves. We have a committee, an expert committee headed by Bimal Jalan going into the issue, and frankly it is a government, the union government elected by the people of this country, which is answerable to the people of the country. This is not to justify the central bank reserves being entirely depleted, but also that one must understand that at the end of the day it is the government which is answerable to the people, not to the central bank. Not the central bank. So, ultimately while it is good that they both work harmoniously, when push comes to shove, ultimately it is a central bank which is subservient to the government, which is why Y.V. Reddy had made this very famous statement that the central bank is independent within the framework given by the government.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, Viral Acharya should have toed the line. He should have perhaps not given that speech. The debate is out on that. What pushed him to quit now just 6 months before? What pushed Urjit Patel to then quit just 9 months before? Okay, Venu, yes, quickly please.
Tamanna, just 2 points. I said earlier that Jalan committee should have been appointed before invoking section 7.
Yeah.
So it was the government's mistake not to have set up the committee last year in time. And number 2, I think Maithili's comparing US Federal Reserve with our central bank is also mistaken, because they are a hard currency nation. We are not. So you must keep that in mind. They can do any amount of QE because they are printing dollars. The world accepts dollars. No, the world does not accept rupees. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, no, let's move on. Let's move on from that point of debate to the broader picture. And I want you to come in on this. So there are a lot of picky issues. One, of course, is about the Reserve Banks and reserves transferring of those dividends to the government. The verdict is still out on that with the Jalan committee. The fact that Viral Acharya seemed to be the dissenting voice, more hawkish than other members of the MPC. Do you think this is going to bring a change in how the MPC now functions, this sense that now the RBI with Shaktikanta Das, a career bureaucrat at the helm, will be more willing to toe the government line?
Well, Tamanna, to be fair, I think Governor Das has done an awesome job of trying to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible. In fact, I think he's had more chats with more representatives of all stakeholders than any of his predecessors put together. And plus it's still a committee, even though one member of the committee has gone away, it's still a 6-member committee. I'm sure all voices will be heard. But very quickly responding to the points, I agree with Hemendra Hazari that, fiscal and monetary stimulus can be helpful at this point in time. My limited point is we've seen this movie before in 2009, where there was everybody agreed that we need monetary stimulus, we need fiscal stimulus, global financial crisis, let's go ahead with it. We know where that led us. We've got to learn from there and sort of move on from there. Second, on this point about RBI balance sheet and capital, yes, capital can be transferred, but let's accept that will be monetization of the deficit. That is akin to the central bank printing money. Again, that has implications. Maybe this time is different, maybe we can do it this time, maybe it's not. It's a debate worth having. Third and final point, actually third point, Governor Das made this point that as long as fiscal deficit is capital accretive, it's going into productive uses, there shouldn't be a problem. Let's at least ensure that a lot of the fiscal deficit excesses is going into revenue line, which is essentially paying salaries and subsidies, etc. Let's push it at least into capital spending. Last line, all this debate on fiscal and monetary policy, we're losing sight of the fact that we require reforms, real reforms on the factors, on land, on labor, on capital. Those entire using the fiscal and the monetary side as a punching bag deviates from the real reform required on the ground to get manufacturing and employment up. That debate is required. We need to ensure we don't use this as a punching bag and have the broader debate.
No, absolutely. And I think we must come to the crux of this particular debate, which is about the autonomy of the RBI. Maithili said very correctly that, a tussle between governments and the RBI is not a new thing. It's been happening for ages. There are, loads of precedent between various governors not really seeing eye to eye on certain things with their respective finance ministers. That's been known. Is it more of the same that we're seeing right now, and is that the worrying trend? And let me come back to Hemendra Hazari with that question. You've said very clearly that you have no sympathies for Viral because after that speech he had no business hanging around, the summary of what you said. But does it point to a larger question that while the government of the day is boss, it is important to have an RBI that stands up?
No, true. I think, although it has been said, I think this problem has come because of the personalities involved. If you see, Raghuram Rajan, Urjit Patel, Viral Acharya, all of them are used to speaking out. I think they should have really been brought in slowly into government at a lower post somewhere so they could interact with government officials, see how matters are sorted out. But unfortunately, what we have seen is you get people from totally outside the Indian system who have not only, been educated abroad, but their work experience has also been alien to the Indian system. And therefore, when you put them here, they turn out to be misfits. However, now with, Shaktikanta Das, who has been very much a part of the system and is also, I think, very close to the government, I think you can, see it getting sorted out, and you can actually see this in the Monetary Policy Committee. Look at the stance of Michael Patra, for example.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point, Hemendra, because at the
just
time...
look at his stance. He was a total hawk, and overnight he's become a dove.
No, I'm talking about your point of outsiders coming in at a time when we're talking about lateral, entries into the bureaucracy. You're saying these global, sometimes superstar economists don't really have a hang of what's happening over here. Anant, you want to come in on that point very quickly?
Look, I agree with Hemendra that some of the issues look like personality issues, and I hope and pray people learn from this. But what it boils down to is the following. I think the independence of central banks in the current context is overrated. I completely agree with the other panelists that end of the day, it's the government of the day that matters. That's answerable to the people, and it will prevail. The RBI has to work within the ambit of that particular independence given to it. At the same time, it has to be able to convey its judicious thoughts to the government, and the government should be big enough to listen to those issues. While it sounds easy and to give a palliative of low interest rates, fiscal splurge, give capital from the RBI to the government for it to spend, all of this sounds like short-term painkillers and palliatives. They can have long-term negative impact, and it's important to have that debate and explain to the government that what you're doing could actually endanger the country medium-term prospects. Or if it doesn't, let's have a debate as to why we can and how we can control the problems. So what we need is some of that outspokenness that Hemendra talked about to continue, maybe behind closed doors, maybe in a more collaborative and collegiate manner. But if you do believe strongly that you're taking the wrong policy, somebody has to be there to actually say that and have that debate.
Well, absolutely. Someone has to stand up and say what they think is wrong. Perhaps that is not the cause behind Viral Acharya's exit. Perhaps it is. Perhaps we'll know in a few months from now. A lot of wisdom has come in hindsight with some of the exits we've spoken about this evening. I want to thank all of you for joining us in this first discussion. MK Venu and Maithili, of course, are staying on with us for our next very interesting topic of debate on the India development debate this evening. And it's all about black money. How much do we have? How much is generated? Where does it come from? You think there may be some answers in the Parliamentary Committee report? Well, let me not spoil it for you. All the details up next.